Hi, this is Virtual Vision FM, your platform to all things spiritual. I'm here today with my wonderful co-host, the Reverend Ted Woodruff and Nick Humphreys. Hi guys, how you doing? Ted?
I'm here.
We
Just took a
all
moment for it to appear. Hello, everybody. Everybody watching, listening, and then on repeat, as and when and if you do. Good to see you all. Can I just say, firstly, at the top of the show, and I'm sure Aaron and Nick will probably express their condolences as well. The awful news and sadness that Nina, our other co-host, her husband passed of all days on Christmas Day. So I just want to send simple love to her and the sincerest of condolences. Other than that, folks, season's greetings if you celebrate Christmas. My jury is a little bit out on Christmas. I'm heading towards the solstices now, interestingly. That's just something that's come to me more this year and everything. But I had a lovely, lovely day with two dear friends, Emma and Lee. Fantastic gifts from people, which was great. Um, um, but as I say, each to their own and their religions, their faiths and their beliefs and what they celebrate. Mine, for a few years, hasn't been particularly passionate about Christmas. I may not be alone in that. But it's as valid as it is for the folks of a belief system. And yes, I am a reverend, but it is of a universal life aspect of all faiths, religions, and denominations. So yeah, I've had a good one. Yeah, and it was just one day in the year, and then the next day it's all over as it is every year. So I've always made that slightly wry observation about the that this particular period of the year. Era, how was yours?
It was all about friends and family and food, and we had a great time. Thank you for talking about Nina and what she's going through. Here at VVFM, we are a family, and when someone's heart is breaking, I think it impacts us all. And I know that our viewers, the live chat attendees, and in the moment, and as well as the archived viewers of the show, will want to send their heartfelt thoughts and wishes her way. Nick, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you, and obviously welcome to everybody to Virtual Vision FM. I was going to say belated Christmas to everybody, and also I concur with what you guys are saying about Nina. My heartfelt condolences to her and her family for the loss. It's a horrible time for it to happen. But we are, well, as you say, one big family, and we all stick together here, and we'd help and support each other, as you have done with me, and also I know we've given our support to Ted as well. Yeah, my Christmas day was a lovely one, spent with family, but then it was disrupted on the Boxing Day by floods. I spent the day digging trenches in the garden, making a flow of water past the house because it was getting closer and closer. In fact, it was up to the house. And I think it was up to about 10 inches at one point outside the house. But yeah, I'm going to be a bit controversial here, but it also made me think about what's going on in the world and what's going on closer to home. And on TV over here, we have lots of adverts day in, day out, probably every hour, for raising money for charities to send abroad for obviously starving children, refugees in Syria, etc. And obviously, I do support these, but I do sometimes feel that maybe sometimes we need to look a little bit closer to home, especially when we've got like the northern England, in Cumbria, they're underwater, and they still have, they were hit 3 times so far. They have been hit 3 times so far by devastating floods, and I think that we just need to look a bit closer to home to support those as we do our loved ones. That's my thoughts for the new year.
Yeah, well, I think that agree with what we've been seeing here over the past couple of days are horrendous tornadoes, etc., down through Dallas. And, there's been some fatalities and there's been lots of destruction. And what a way to end the year. And I think today with Simon Ludgate, our guest, we'll get to him in a few minutes here. He's going to talk about some of the highlights of what has gone on in 2015 and how things might be different or unfold in a larger way, perhaps in the coming year, 2016. So, yeah, it's going to be a great show. And I think what we need to do right now is set the stage and have Ted come on and do his 1 minute me moment. Ted?
Thanks, Sarah. And yes, I hear all that Nick and yourself say regarding Christmas as well. So, hi to everybody in the chat room again. And I'm going to do my regular 1 minute me moment, which came about maybe more than a year ago now. And it kind of just came to me. Some might say it was channeled to me. I don't know. You know, there's a very down to earth aspect to life. There's also the enormity of the divine as well. You need to get that balance in between, in my opinion, as a human having the spiritual experience and the spiritual being having the human experience. So, yeah, the 1 minute me moment, it came to my mind that we don't take time out for ourselves in any given day. We just don't do it. I was equally, and still am at times, equally guilty of that. And, you know, we give out, we go to work, we drive cars, we look after our children, we have relationships, life gets in the way sometimes of taking moments for ourselves. So I just came up with the concept of taking 1 minute out of your day, because that's just a small amount of time. And if you take 60 seconds just for you, at least you've done something for you on a daily basis. And the method that I suggest and recommend you try, and you may tinker with it a little bit, but is to find at some point in your day when the children are at school or your partner's at work or you're in your lunch hour, is just to find a quiet place where you can sit, close your eyes, and concentrate on your breathing to start with. And that very simply is to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and in through your mouth and out through your nose. The reason I alternate it is because it then makes you concentrate on your breathing, but you can equally do the in only or the out only of the mouth or the nose. And at the same time that you've got your eyes shut and you're concentrating on your breathing, imagine that you're grounded. And there are many methods of grounding, but the simplest one, and I think is a workable one, is to imagine a vine joining your ankles, and then another vine that's attached to the middle of that one that goes down, 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 deep into Mother Earth and attaches itself around a rock, boulder, big old tree trunk that grounds you down and stops you floating off sort of etherically. So you've got your breathing going, you've got your grounding going, and the next thing is to put an aura of protection around yourself. Now, in the UK, there was an advert, the Whitney Ready Brett Kid, which was a very good representation of an aura, in my opinion, a golden aura around him. Well, similar sort of thing I would ask you to try and do, and put any colour around yourself, whichever colour you resonate with. And as I say each week, my particular colours are gold and white because I just like those colours, or lack of colour with white. And so that's the third thing you've done. You're grounded, you're breathing, and you're protected. And the eggshell of protection around yourself, or the aura of protection, just stops the negatives coming in. Now, I accept that those invisible things that you're doing, you might think, well, is that actually going to do anything? Well, give it a go, because I'm just the same as everybody else. But when you do it, it works. It's all about intent. The whole of the universal concept, in my opinion, is about intent. But if you intend to ground, you intend to put protection around yourself, it so works. And so now you've settled yourself into those three things of the breathing, the grounding, and the protection around yourself. Just spend the next minute connecting wherever you want. Perhaps to the divine, perhaps to the heavens, perhaps to the other dimension. Maybe to the angels and archangels if they resonate with you. Maybe to Native American spirit guides that resonate with you. Maybe with loved ones who have passed on into the other realm. And just spend 60 seconds connecting with them, thinking about them, communicating with them, whatsoever, because they will hear your thoughts. They will hear your thoughts. So you don't have to say it out loud. You can if you want, and you're not in a busy old room. Spend that 60 seconds, give it a try on a day-to-day basis. You may well increase it to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and that'd be great. But if you actually achieve the 1 minute me moment each day, you may not sense anything major the first few times you do it, but as you progress and you do it and it becomes a regular, it does so work. And on the part of visualizing, as with the grounding and the aura of protection around yourself, I'm no different to anyone else. I've had my moments when I cannot visualize and get it in my head. And there are some folks who get a bit scared about that. They can't do it. They can't, can't, why? And it's not going to work. Ask. Just ask in your mind to be grounded and to be protected if you're having trouble visualizing, because that works. And again, it all comes back to intent. So give it a shot, and it's become something that we've done regularly on the show now, and I will continue to do for as long as, and that is the Rev Ted's 1 Minute Me Moment.
And I always follow up with try it, then deny it. It's 1 minute well spent. You know, I have to agree with you, Ted. I really believe the intent is the driver of the bus, always. And if we have that pure intent, it'll carry us far. It's everything.
I totally agree, and I tell you what, I could talk on a whole show for 2 hours about the power of intent, because I've experienced it. I have come to recognize it, and when you get it in your head that it's very real and very powerful, and you don't necessarily have to verbalize it all, but you send it out in the mind, it's incredibly effective and so simple. And that's the whole point about the spiritual, which I won't go into now because I know I can go off on one when I get on the subject, but the power involved is actually so simple. And I've learned something this year, that actually when you bring it back to basics, which I've always said about old school, down to earth, keep it simple, but even I've simplified even more, and I've realized I actually didn't have to do so many things in preparation for healing, so many things in the world of phoning up or writing down or whatever. Send the intent out there. They recognize it, whoever your guides are, because they're all the same essentially. Thump, it happens. So yes, you see what happens, folks? Era says one word, and I'm off on one for half an hour. We've got a great guest on tonight. He's a dear friend of mine. He's a dear friend of many people, but I've had the benefit and the delight of spending several afternoons with him down here at Turns to Namaste group. And what I'm going to do, because I do benefit enormously from this wonderful connection that we have, I'm going to hand over to Era to lead the show with him and give her the chance, and then I'll be brought in every so often. So big warm welcome to Simon from me, at least.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ted. And you know, I just want to preface Simon's appearance here by letting people know that Simon is a man of many hats. It's absolutely amazing to me, if not mind-blowing altogether, that this man is a journalist, a TV producer. He is an author, but he's also a shaman. He's also a healer, and his intuitive quality is bang on. You know, I don't think there's anything that this man can set his mind to that doesn't succeed. So having said that, welcome to the show, Simon. You are one of my favorite guests, and I'm always tickled when you come on. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Good.
And I'm delighted to tickle you.
Yeah. Oh, here we go, and we're off. Just for the sake of new viewers, and perhaps to refresh the memories of our current viewers, can you just give us a little bit of your background?
Yes, I'm very old, as you can see, and I was originally, when I was little more than a child, a journalist. It was my first profession, and I was a broadcast journalist for 10 years. Then I became a radio journalist, and then I started producing and directing TV programs, and that spanned about 15 years, and I went into making science documentaries, and that led me all over the world and led me to write first one book, which was called The Accidental Wizard, which was sort of my journey and was an autobiographical account of my spiritual acceleration. I wouldn't say it was the sort of the awakening of my spiritual side, because I grew up in a very spiritual relationship with my mum, who was the most amazing healer, and became a bit of a legend in the southeast of England and in London before she passed away in 2006. And the travelling and the documentary making became clear that it was part of my education and where I was going, and the experiences I was having with disasters like earthquakes and the aftermath of tsunami was all part of that growth experience. And I feel very blessed and very lucky to have had those experiences, although I guess luck doesn't come into it. It did feel quite pre-planned. And now here I am. I, in the last few years, have become more attuned to my spiritual side, and I think the big lesson that I've learned in terms of my own development is to stand, as we all do, in the light and not hide what I do and not shy away from what I do, which I had tended to do before. And I now tell people what I do. I'm very proud of what I do, and in fact, I went to a Christmas party for a really famous and really good international chef and his family a couple of Fridays ago, and I met this hilarious guy who's a big mate of David Cameron, our Prime Minister in Britain, as everyone in Britain knows, and probably everybody else does vaguely as well. And he had a mouthful of marbles. He was all sort of, "Oh, hello, it's very nice to meet you. Yes, well, what do you do for a living?" I'm an investment banker." And I said, "Oh, I do exorcisms." And he went, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." And it took him a while to process this, and he went, "How absolutely extraordinary. I've never met anybody who does exorcisms before. You must meet my wife." And for the rest of the evening, he went around introducing himself as my agent. Just for a joke, and it kind of became a running gag for the evening. And he said, "Oh, this is Simon. Yes, he does exorcisms. I'm his agent, so if you want anything done, you talk to me first." And I thought that was lovely, because I could see in the space of about 10 seconds his perception machine kind of clicked in, and he was going, "Am I just going to laugh in his face and walk away, or am I going to embrace this?" And he looked at my face, and I didn't say anything. I just said, "I do exorcisms now." And I looked at him, and he went, "Oh my God, he's serious." So he sort of took it from there. So that kind of brings me up to where I am now, which is the last few months, and the last few months since I was last on the show, and since we really had a chance to speak, I suppose, I've been doing a lot of home visits for people with their houses, and it's incredible how many people in this country have issues with the place where they live, which affects them and their families enormously.
Mm-hmm. Well, how can it not, really? When you think about it, we're all the same energy, whether we're in a body or not. It's only logical for me to think that we're going to be bumping into them once in a while.
Well, yes, absolutely. And I've been learning a lot about trans-dimensional beings and the structure of what they are and how varied it is, because it's not Mrs. McGinty's ghost the whole time, as we all know. I'm stating the obvious, but it really isn't. It's so much more complex than that. It's the range of the universe, really, in terms of what you encounter, and you're not just encountering the odd stuck spirit, although I do encounter plenty. They come from very, very different times. It's like walking through the most amazing jungle that's full of a whole range of insects and animals, from ants to big cats to monkeys and and flying things and glowworms and the occasional person. It's so almost infinitely varied.
Wow. That'll keep you on your toes there, Simon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
How exciting.
It does. It does.
That's tremendously exciting, and I think there's a show in that topic all on its own. Let's do that. Let's plan on that. Um, what I'd like to discuss with you today is this cosmic perspective that we're moving from the 2015 to the 2016, and there's, I've always thought, just on an intuitive level, that 2015 was the beginning of what is going to be major changes. And I always felt those major changes would occur in 2016, not in 2015. But I think what we're seeing right now is the beginning of a lot of those changes, where paradigms are destined to fall, and new belief structures and a new way of doing things is going to replace it, which is kind of a joyful thing to think about. But it's getting to that point. I would love it if you would share your infinite wisdom, because I know you write a lot about all these different topics that have gone on in 2015, and just reflect on the year for us. What were some of the biggest moments, do you think?
Well, we've had an absolutely apocalyptic earthquake in Nepal, which happened back on March 20th this year, which seems to always accompany change. We seem to have, and I'm tuned into this because I've done so many of these events over the last 10 years, starting with the Indonesian tsunami through to the tsunami in Japan. But when there's tumult, the earth seems to reflect that. Mm-hmm. Nick touched on it a little earlier, and I think he's absolutely right. I really agree with him that when the energy of the earth is being excited and changed, the earth itself seems to reflect that. And in fact, it's happening right now. We've just had a full moon on Christmas Day that combined with two really big M flares from the sun, big solar flares, which kind of lap around the Earth at about, I think they do about 800,000 miles an hour. I think that's right. So it takes quite a while for the effects of them to reach the Earth, but it takes a few days. But we've had two big solar flares, and an earthquake in Afghanistan yesterday, 6.3, which was sort of the end of a swarm of them that I've been tracking over the last few days. There's been a big sort of spike in the number of earthquakes, and that happened around the Nepalese earthquake. Similar kind of thing. It was just after a full moon. There was an earthquake spike when you get a whole load of them happening very quickly, one after the other, and it culminated in the 7.4 magnitude one in Nepal. And there's also a lot of solar flare activity at the same time from the sun. On a spiritual level, it feels to me that the Earth has been in tumult this year, and that there has been an enormous amount of spiritual activity that's been going on at the same time as a lot of physical activity. I follow global events. I've been following what's been happening with Russia in the Ukraine and Crimea. I've been following what's been happening in particular in the Middle East, which I find worrying. And next year is a year 9 numerologically, which means it's a year of change, of endings, and of new beginnings. And I would like to stick with your vision of it being the start of lots of new things, lots of positive things. But I do feel it's not really a but, it's a sort of extra thought. I do feel that there is an increasing amount of polarization in the way that the Earth works, and in the way that the spiritual yin and yang energy is working on the planet with the energy that comes down from the Creator, the energy that started all of this and started the whole universe and triggered everything. The increase in energy is so enormous, it's making my ears ring. And I've been doing a little bit of research about this ear ringing thing, which is commonly called tinnitus, not Tourette's, Ted, but tinnitus, and and it's very common. But I have been asking people I know, just on a direct kind of scale, who started developing a ring in their ears around January, February, March of this year. And I was astounded to get the response that I did. I thought I'd get one or two replies, but dozens of people said they had. And I suspect there are more, but they just didn't see the communication on social media. But it included dozens and dozens of people who started getting a ringing or a whistling in their ears. And what prompted me to ask that was that Mike Dooley, who is a really well-known spiritual leader in America, he takes people to Machu Picchu, writes lots and lots of books on spiritual matters, and is incredibly well-known. He's much followed. And he wrote a piece saying that he had started getting this ringing in his ears in about March of this year, saying who else had it. And on his replies, he was getting hundreds of replies from people. Now, how interesting is that? And although it may just be an outbreak of people listening to too much loud music, or old age, or both, or I don't know, but there seemed to be an enormous number of people who were experiencing the same thing at the same time. And it's funny when you actually put the question out there, because you get the most amazing response. And I just wonder whether that's as a result of a big increase in energy, or whether it's as the result of a celestial body approaching us, which is what a lot of people think with Nibiru. I don't get that myself, but who knows? 10 years ago, we didn't think that Chiron existed, and all the NASA scientists and astronomers said, well, of course, that's total rubbish. It doesn't exist. It does, and it's now part of the solar system, and it's linked. I mean, it's a long way out there, but it does actually exist. So who's to say that there isn't another huge planet floating around on the edges of our solar system that we haven't quite identified yet?
Mm-hmm.
And there must be a collective reason why people who I would consider to be sensitive are getting this reading in their heads. It's sort of driving me down the bend.
It is interesting, Simon. I have tinnitus in my ear, but I'm also stone deaf in that ear, and so the ringing is the only thing I actually am able to hear in my right ear. But it's been like that for maybe 3 or 4 years now. And oddly enough, when I hear spirit, that's the ear I hear spirit in. So it's almost like they've just closed it down and said, no, that's ours, so you're going to have to make do with one ear kind of thing. But it's interesting in the chat room, you posed that question about the ringing in the ears starting probably back in January, February, and yes, there's a lot of people in the chat room that are kind of claiming that. So you're not far off the mark there at all.
How interesting! I've had this feeling for about 6 to 9 months, and I know that Ted shares this feeling with me, and I think you do as well. That there is a gathering of speed. There is an increase in volume spiritually, and I think that what's happening is the world is coming to a head. I think that the light and the darkness are becoming more pronounced. I think there is a bigger and bigger difference between those who are spiritually in the light and those who are descending into the darkness. And what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, and the phenomenon of the Exodus. I mean, it's like the Israelites coming out of Egypt before they got to Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
The phenomenal exodus out of the Middle East into Europe is going to change society in profound ways. Yes, there are only just over 1 million of them, and Europe has a population of, I think, almost 500 million in the 28 countries that constitute Europe. But it's profound, and I think it will take us several years to understand how profound that is.
I think you're
There
right.
seems to be a sorry to cut across you there. There seems to be a process in play in the Middle East at the moment that I think is going to result in a major war.
Mm-hmm.
All the pieces are in place.
Yes, and at the same time, there's this underlying expansion going on that you have talked about just moments ago. And to me, it is an expansion and an acceleration. So, you know, the duality that we live within has expanded to ridiculous proportion, I think. And so we see the opportunities for war and the rumors of war and the probability of war. And on the other side, on a spiritual level, we have this expansion going on with light workers right now. And, you know, Ted, Nick, I would love to hear your take on this. But even for light workers, this expansion is huge. Everything is changing in a wild and wonderful way. But even the work is changing. The acceleration is hitting everybody, and we're either with it or we're resisting it. And if we're resisting it, it's going to be, what's that word, Ted? Exponentially challenging if we're kind of like balking at it, right? But yeah, I agree. There's a huge expansion going on and an acceleration. And yes, over here, hanging over everyone's head, is that probability of war. Ted, Nick, which one would you like?
Yeah, it's so interesting. It happens all the time, certainly with Era and Simon, absolutely, that your words are my words, and you almost say exactly, you verbalise exactly what I think, so I'm there with you. And this awareness, I'm down at the coast sitting in a little house at Little Stone, all right, just one guy here, which I've said a few times, but the reason I say that is that I am, in one sense, alone in my situation, in one sense, but I've had this awareness developing over quite some while, exactly as Simon said and Era has said, that I sense whether it's a paradigm shift, I'm not entirely sure what paradigm means, but whether there is a shift, there is something major developing, spiritual awareness in so many people around me and globally and internationally, which is the same as globally. It is quite clearly heading that way. And when we have folk like Simon talking, whether he's here or on the show, and the Era talking about it, you realize that you're not alone at all in sensing that, and the sense that there are those who are ascending, not because they're better, they're just kind of got it perhaps a little more than the average individual, if for want of a better expression, that there is this exponential rise of awareness going on in so many people. And I've wondered to myself, well, is it because I'm in that zone? And I'm in that fortunate position in one sense of being retired in one way, but also doing the work that I do here in another way, that my focus is on it more than others are able to do. I think it does go beyond that. I do believe there is that absolute energetic change where those who are, for want of a better word, enlightened, or have opened their eyes and their ears to it and start to get it and listen as much as hearing, that they are taking that that gradient up, very, very swift ascension for some people. I've had people around me this year who came on a level, as I say, there's no hierarchy in my eyes, but they've come in at a level, and then they've suddenly flown. Thank you. Really know. So there comes the spiritual thread. They've flown suddenly up that gradient very swiftly. So I'm absolutely with you. And again, as Simon alluded to about the fearful sort of situation that's happening in the Middle East, and it's almost biblical proportions again, as he said, and this exodus of migrants coming and refugees coming over here to this country. It's dramatic. It's the like of which we haven't seen before, and something is a coming. And as Sean says, it's very worrying. It is very worrying. So there is almost this battle between good and evil. It's tumultuous. It is big, and it is heading. It is here, and it is happening. And I'm grateful that I'm on what I believe is the light side, the good side, and will survive, as will many of those that are going on. So that's my take on it.
Well,
as you know, I could have an opinion forever.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I quickly want to go to Nick before we go back to Simon. I want to see where Simon is going to take this next. Nick, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are quite lengthy, unfortunately. Going back to the very first Iraq War, back in '91, I think there was a huge intake of people that were becoming open to spiritual ways. And that's again very apparent. If you actually go back and look at the start of, I mean, it's been what 8-9 years now since the second Iraq War, and if Afghanistan, etc., etc. The awakening of the amount of people since then has been huge. So basically, there's been a bit of a balance going on with the horrible things that have been going on, like the Iraq War, etc. And the amount of people that have become aware or started to become aware of the spiritual side of things, whether or not they're getting the ringing in the ears as a sign that they need to wake up to what's going on. So I think what's going on is that people need to be more aware of the spiritual side of things. And I said in the chat room, actually, there's going to be a massive exodus or an uprising of the spiritual people. I don't know why I needed to say that. I think it was guided for me to put that into the chat room. And I think even my guide said about a year ago or 6 months ago that if we actually look at everything that's been going on, and Simon's just actually put a message in there about vaccination, so a controlling of the people. So there's vaccinations. Game consoles are a brainwashing tool, from what my guide said to me, and I've actually got him recorded saying that as well. That they are brainwashing children into the horrible effects of war and shooting, because there's loads of games out there that are all violent. They're all directed towards the violence. So we have to try and claw away from that. It's really hard to explain what I'm trying to get to, but there is going to be a huge exodus. There's a film out, it's a Nicolas Cage film, as corny as it may sound. The whole concept of the film is that his son is given codes from the 1950s that was buried in a chamber, and his Nicolas Cage, the father, worked out that these codes were actually dates, the amount of people, and destinations where disasters were happening. But actually, realistically, this is sort of thing that's happening now. We're getting messages from spirit people, getting ringing in the ears. These are, we need to be more assertive with our spiritual ways to pull together, not just as one race or different races together, but as one being, as one person. In the film, I think it's aliens that come down, dare I say it, and give stones or pebbles to the kids, and it's those kids that get the pebbles that are taken away. And I actually put a comment in there in the chat room saying there is going to be a huge exodus of the spiritual-minded people. And Sean Cohen said, and where do we go? And I think that's basically where I'm trying to get to, is that I don't know where we go, but I think we actually get taken to where we need to go, whether it's in this dimension, in another dimension, even on the same earth plane. I don't know, but there's something horrible around the corner. It scares me. I'm frightened. I'm frightened not just for my family, but for friends, the rest of the human race, and also the animals as well. But it's not going to be a nice thing. It's a difficult thing to talk about because there's so much going in on it. I don't know if Simon can come in and try and grab what I'm trying to get hold of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think while Simon's coming back, I can just sort of add to that. And my sense, I don't know for sure, but it was what you touched on, that I sense that there's going to be an interdimensional shift for those who are enlightened. That's my take on it, hence my quiet confidence that we're kind of going to be okay if we're working in that aspect. And we've had kind of been a mixture of chosen by the divine, in my opinion, and a mixture of accepting in our own minds and thought processes and consciousness. We've accepted in back at them, if you know what I mean. So we've taken it on board. So I would say for that, it's a little bit almost like you know, if you'll have salvation as long as you come to the faith, like in churches or whatever. I don't actually mean it in that sense. I do feel that those who open their eyes and they literally open their ears, they don't just hear but they listen, they have more of a chance than those who have their heads down and are just sort of unaware. But there will be loss, there will be sort of sadly loss of life, although as most people know, I believe that life, you can't kill energy, so it persists forever and eternal. So, you know, people may pass from this earth plane into another plane of death in one sense. Others would go to another level of consciousness. That's my take on it. I don't know where all that came from. So yeah, if Simon's listening and he can come back and
this ascension, this mass exodus kind of thing, I don't know how I feel about that, because I can't see how we would choose, and we did all choose. My firm belief is we chose this kind of path before we even incarnated, and we're here to do the best we can on it. Why would we, as a collective, and I'm talking about light workers, come with the intent of being of service and then bailing when things got tough? Like, I really don't. To me, my guides are saying, like, I channeled for years, and I channeled all these terrible things that were going to happen, and a lot of them have come true. I stopped doing that because, to me, there was nothing I could do to change it, because the way it was channeled, you didn't know what it meant until after the fact. So I thought, well, there's no point in this. But really what my guides had shown me was that this is the time when these things are going on, this is the time to anchor yourself and anchor your light, because that's what you're here to do, to make an impact. So we all have a job to do. And I don't know if I guess there's some, obviously, there's always going to be people who are ready to make that transition, but I don't see how a lot of spiritual people need to have a mass exodus, because to me that's like bailing off the earth plane when we're here to anchor our light and make a difference. So with the upcoming changes, paradigms are going to fall. And when I say paradigms, I'm not saying, oh, little tiny beliefs. I'm talking about religion. Religion is a paradigm that is going to be dismantled, and it's going to come as quite a shock to a lot of people, I think. The financial component is another one that we are going to have to work our way through. There's all sorts of huge paradigms that are going to crumble, and soon. And, you know, if we're not here to help be the way showers for a new way to be with a brand new vibration, right, then what's the point, I guess, is my thing. Is Simon back yet?
he's not, but I think
Yes,
Nick's putting his hand.
I am.
Oh, you.
Sorry,
There.
switching on my buttons there.
I was just going to say, actually, Aero, I understand what you're saying, but, you know, in this line of work, I know that we have a choice in sometimes or in the things that we're meant to be doing. But actually, do you think we do have a choice? Do you think it's actually in our control? If they're higher beings, they're going to be doing what's right.
But on the soul level, my soul knows exactly why it's here.
Yeah.
And my humanness does not recognize that there's a reason or a time for when I leave. That's sort of like segregated to me.
Yes,
And
but
so the human level, no, I don't know when.
as a light worker, you've been chosen to do something on a higher plane and on a higher vibration, and sometimes that choice will be taken out of your hands. You know, I always tell people, if it's not right for you, it'll either be moved or removed, okay, or you'll be removed from that situation, because that's what spirit want to do. They have the power and the energy to remove you from that energy, okay. And I think with this, because it's such a higher power, they will do that also. I'm interested to see what Simon's got to say.
So Mike, Simon.
Before I answer that question, I want to get back into that very much, can I ask all of you to join with me to send a little healing from Archangel Raphael with Archangel Raphael's green healing light to a little 6-month-old boy called Ari, who is very ill in hospital down in Bristol in England at the moment. He was born struggling, and I went to see him a couple of weeks ago. He's on a life support system, like a miniature life support system with a ventilator and an incubator down his throat. He's very, very ill. And can I ask 3 of you, as you're all mighty healers, to join with me and send little Ari some healing right now, and wish him well and urge him not to give up the fight and to keep going and come through and prove that he is the little fighter. When I was down there, I gave him my big fat finger and his tiny little fist, and his hand is the same size as the tip of my finger. And I put my finger in the palm of his hand, and he squeezed me so hard, even though he was actually sedated. He squeezed me, and I said, Ari, you're such a wonderful little soul. Squeeze my hand again. And he just squeezed it again. He's such a great little guy. And I have this vision that in 2.5, 3 years' time, he's going to come around the corner and knock me over and give me a massive hug and a squeeze around my knees. And he'll be fit as a fiddle and a happy little boy. So could I just ask for us to send that healing energy to him right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, when you fight the fight on an individual level, it has so much more meaning. And the answer I'm about to give you on what we were just talking about, thank you for that, is not particularly good news. And here is my view about what Nick has raised in terms of what he feels is coming and what we're kind of talking around here. There has been, I'm going to try and do this as quickly as I can, there's been a battle between good and evil since the beginning of time. When the angels fell, when Lucifer and his angels symbolically or actually, who knows, fell from heaven and became incarnated and started to walk amongst us, when the celestial experiments of the Garden of Eden failed and we experienced temptation and the perfection of the original vision of what life should be fell apart, the evil energy started to penetrate into our consciousness. We're an experiment that's gone wrong. We're an experiment that's gone wrong before, and we're currently experiencing the disintegration around us of that experiment. There are people on the planet who are generally called as a collective name the Illuminati, who have been working together for a good 250 years to work towards having a global army, to have people enslaved, to have our rights taken away, and to have us living in fear and controlled by all sorts of elements. And they've done that by controlling our thoughts, by scaring us, by introducing the idea of terrorism, which happens, but they make coin out of it and use that to control us. They don't introduce these martial law acts to control terrorists. They introduce them to control us, because that's always been the vision. And there is a coherent plan that's in place that's been going for 300 years with the the Red Shield, who are now known as the Rothschild or the Rothschilds, and they have been working along this plan as a reaction, I think, to the end game, which is dissolution into utter chaos. And I think that their motivation is ultimately planned to try and control what they saw as being disintegration of morality. But obviously the benefit of that is total power, a huge amount of financial gain, but there is a game plan in afoot, and you can see it over the last 300 or 400 years with coming out of the Knights Templar in the Middle Ages in the Middle East, the formation of the Roman Catholic Church, the formation of banking, the introduction of lending money, of gold being the basis of power with the Roman Catholic Church, and then subsequent governments. The Knights Templar formed that template, which people have been following ever since, and we've been living a lie ever since then, because there's no such thing as loaned money. You can't lend people money you don't have, but that's what the bank's doing at the moment, and that's what they have been doing since they started. It's a total fantasy. And they being the Illuminati, which is a handy collective name for people who are behind this plan. They backed the French Revolution, they backed the Russian Revolution, they backed the French during the war for global power with the British. They backed the Nazis during the Second World War. They backed the reconstruction of Europe. And it's worth pointing out that the first thing that the Allies did after the Second World War was not to go in and try and kill everybody, which is what ISIS are doing at the moment. It's a very different model. There was no sense of revenge and destruction and nihilism and of being a death cult like ISIS. The first thing they did was to rebuild their enemy's country in Germany and throughout Europe to form the basis of the EU. And there was a story in the press. Actually, I read it on Russia Today's website today about how Angela Merkel is promoting the idea of having one army in NATO, having one army across the whole of the 28 countries. That's part of the plan. To have one army, to have one leader, and to be able to control big chunks of the world. Russia, India, China, Brazil, and South Africa, who are just a mess, but they're tagging along, have opted out of this. And the Illuminati, I do not believe, control them. And I think this is where President Putin is coming from, is that he knows all of this. He can see it happening, and he is resisting it, which is why he is the new Satan. And from Russia's point of view, they quite like him. He's quite a popular guy. He's a bit like Abramovich at Chelsea. You know, he's kind of a bit of a tartar, but he's quite popular. And when you see this from Russia's point of view rather than the American point of view, which in America, in England, in Britain, we tend to follow that view, they are not quite as evil as they seem. But there is definitely a very coherent, manipulative plan that's in place to control countries one by one. And you'll notice they've been picked off as being, the home of Satan, which Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq with Saddam Hussein, the Sudan, Cuba with Castro. Cuba now has an American central bank, and gosh, they're all lovely and fluffy and friendly, and everyone's getting on well with them. Isn't that fantastic? You see the pattern. Same with Afghanistan, the same with Iraq, the same with Libya, although Libya is a complete mess and has become it's a nightmare of a place. And the northern province of Libya, which is where Gaddafi originally came from, is now under Sharia control, and ISIS are now running that, and they are a 2-hour boat ride from Europe. And they've also been coming, I promise you this is true, they've also been coming in their droves as part of the migrant force. If you look at them, mainly young, strapping, strong men. Not all of them, but there are an awful lot of them who are of that ilk. why aren't they turning around and militarizing and going back and fighting ISIS? Why are they all running away? I mean, I know that women and children and elderly men will run away, but why aren't there young men fighting in the way that the young Czechs during the communist takeover of Czechoslovakia fought back as the resistance? Why aren't they doing what they did in France when the resistance fought back against the Germans? They didn't run away. Why is that happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's by design.
It's by design.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an argument that the whole plan with the migrant force was intentional. And again, this is part of the plan. You know, it's all going according to plan. It's all going swimmingly.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think, too, Simon? I don't know. I am so cynical when it comes to world leaders. I think they're all in the same basket. They're just playing different roles, and that is to serve to only distract everyone. So Putin might look like the real good guy right now because that's his role, but he's really part and parcel of and part of the game that's being played. Is that correct?
I don't agree. No, I don't agree. I think that Putin is playing for. I think Putin is playing for his own agenda. You know, he represents three of the most powerful nations in the world: Russia, China, and India, with the BRICS conglomerate, who are the alternative to the World Trade Organization. The WTO are basically everybody else. That's sort of the all of Europe, all of America. We're all in it together, and we all tend to side, and that's the way that global power works. And I don't think that the Illuminati have got to Putin. I think that he and I don't think they've got to China, and I don't think they've got to India, and I think they see them as being the final massive push in terms of the threat. And that's why the next world war will be between the World Trade Organization countries, which is NATO and America, and Russia, China, Iran, and possibly India. You know, there's an enormous amount of tension between India and Pakistan. You just never know what's going to happen there.
Well, I noticed a comment by Nick in the chat room, and he said he always believed that Russia were the good guys. And you know, this latest installment in Russian history, when Putin moved to protect the Crimea, and the United States was calling it an evil act, and you know it was war worthy, etc. And I thought, no, Putin's been around the block on this before. It's not his first rodeo, and he has assets to protect. So, you know, you can't sort of blame a leader to protect the assets that sort of, you know, supplement his own country and his own people. And but to hear the United States talk, it was a fate worse than anything, right? Like he just
what Hillary Clinton's chief advisor was. I saw an interview with her about a month ago where she was talking quite freely and openly about America's investment and interference with the situation when ISIS are basically the residue of the troops that were left behind after Saddam Hussein was taken out, and they went to fight next door in Syria, and we all kind of jumped onto it and thought, oh, there's a destabilizing force, we'll have them. And she, I can't remember her name, talked quite openly about the fact that and it's generally known that America and the Allies were funding them, training them, and giving them arms. Although America are very embarrassed about their attempt to train the non-ISIS fighters, the anti-Assad fighters in Syria. They spent $500 million on arming and training them. They ended up with a total force of 4 people. $500 million to train 4 people. All that armament and training went off to fight Assad, and they just sort of, you know, walked away from that relationship. So there is, you can't really pretend that there hasn't been an awful lot of interference and game playing and political one-upmanship that's been going on. I mean, it is an absolute mess. When you look at the relationships in the Middle East, it is an absolute mess in terms of who's friends with who and who isn't friends with who because they're friends with somebody else, and then they change their allegiances all the time. It is an unwinnable, always has been an unwinnable situation. You can't impose American or Western morality or political uh, priorities or rules in the Middle East. It just doesn't work. Impossible.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I want to go to Ted. I think Ted has something to say in response to this, and no doubt Nick will have something to say too. So, Ted?
Oh, I've so got opinions on everything, me. But yeah, my God, as Simon's talking, again, it is that word, his words being my words. And one interesting observation I'll say to folks is with Simon. I mean, we connect really good, and it's brilliant when he comes to visit, and I can't sort of get enough of him. But he has his own life, sort of thing. But this RT aspect, that unbeknownst to me, he watched RT. I mean, that's just something he chooses to do. But about a year or more ago, I suddenly got into my mind. I've been BBC all the way along for years and years and years, and something just made me go, let's have a look at RT and see what they're about. And I flipped then between the two in the early days to just get an angle on what they were saying, whether they were propaganda and whether they were this, that, and the other. Now, a year or more on, I have RT as my main news information that I choose to get. I accept that there will be an element of propaganda. But on the other hand, when you look at the BBC, you realise that they are just thrust in the party line. And whether they say they're political or not, they are undoubtedly political with a huge bias going on, where they, I've set myself off now and you guys have set me off. But that's just an observation I make. What I've learned through RT and others like Al Jazeera and the French 24 and whatever, flipping between those sometimes, is that you do get more of a geopolitical view than you got just from your homespun BBC. And coming on to Russia in particular, and there are varying opinions in the chat room, and there's varying opinions amongst the hosts probably, I've come to realize now that I was brought up in a country that was very much allied to the Americas, which it still is, and that the great bear of Russia was the baddie, and we were the goodies and they were the baddies. Well, I tell you what, at the age of nearly 54 now, I personally am more inclined to go towards the Vladimir Putins of this world, because what I see going on in the Americas and the policing systems and all of that going on, I'm not saying there's not horrors go on in Russia, but if I was going to visit anywhere in the world where it would have been America, the land of the free at one time, I would be far more inclined to go with the Russian visit and to get to know the Russians going on there. On the political issue in the Middle East, isn't it interesting how I think it was the Americans spent something like a year allegedly bombing ISIS, okay, with all that comes with them, their great army machine. And Putin achieved more in 2 weeks, in the early weeks of it, than they had done in a year. So that kind of got me thinking, well, it's only a personal opinion. It may be controversial for the British listeners to hear this, but, my opinion of Cameron and our government or whatever is not the highest in the world, and I welcome Jeremy Corbyn, but I know that Simon's a little bit thingy about Jeremy. But yeah, basically, politics is a subject that can be thrown around and discussed forever and a day, and the Brits do the weather, the politics, and the sex very good. Those three conversations you kind of try to avoid in a wine party. But yes, I hear what Simon says on the geopolitical side of things, and I personally resonate a lot with that. Go for it. Yes, I go off on one. I know it, and we do it when we're talking.
Yeah, Nick, did you want to?
Simon's got his hand up. We've got to let Simon come back on that, I think, just for a moment.
Okay, hold on. We'll go to Simon first, and then Nick. Go ahead.
Can we just talk about? Can we talk about false flags?
Yes.
Because I can tell you that during the trouble in the Ukraine, when it really kicked off, was it two years ago really, they found evidence of the fact that there were snipers who were shooting at both sides. Okay, now the reason that was happening, the same snipers were shooting at both sides, and there were various press people there who witnessed this happening, and the reason that was happening was because that was a classic example of an attempt to destabilize an already very destabilized situation. And I think that what I wanted to say was that I think it's really important that people get their heads around the fact that things are never the way that they are portrayed. When something happens, like the dreadful slaughter, indiscriminate slaughter in Paris, which was so so upsetting and horrified everybody, or any number of these things which gradually fade into people's memory, but are sort of absolutely horrendous at the time. There is always a secondary agenda where somebody is playing a very, very dark game to manipulate a situation. And from my research, it is almost invariably true that this happens in every single situation with any kind of crisis or terrorist attack. Is there's always some sort of really dark manipulation going on in the background, and nobody tells the truth. You know, this is what I find so hurtful and negative and satanic about the world that we live in now, is that nobody tells us the truth. You know, when people like when we're sitting here talking, you know, we talk honestly and openly, but don't ever think that your cuddly friend, and I'm totally agree with what Ted was just saying about Russia Today and comparing news sources. Never think that they're your friend. They're not. They're not there for you. They're there to manipulate you. So we all have our kind of cuddly friends in the media. Like in Britain on Radio 4, we have John Humphreys, who used to live very near me in West London, and he's a very, very nice man. And you know, your favourite Sky presenter or your favourite Fox News presenter, if you're that weird. But we all have our friends, and we tend to listen to what they say, and we believe them because we tend to trust them. Don't.
Well, there you go, Nick.
Yeah, first of all, I would just say that I don't actually watch news anymore because I don't believe anything they tell you, because they are controlled. They're only governed to tell you what the government wants you to know. So there's lots of hidden stuff that they're not going to tell you. You're not going to find out. Secondly, I said I think about 8 years ago to somebody as a passing comment that actually, do you know what? Russia will be the good guys. I know there's going to be bad press. Yes, Russia have always been told that they're the bad guys, but you know, Putin will be the one to stand up. He'll be the one. He's got more backbone than the UK government, the US government put together. You know, he'll be the one, along with others as well, that will be the one that will be the fighting force. I also believe, and I think I said this probably in the same breath, that actually the way that things are going, and if it continues the way it's going, there'll also be civil unrest over here in the UK. And I think you'll find that actually there'll be bands or pockets of this going on across the world where people will just want to take control from the government. So you know, the British people would have had enough with what's going on, and they'll start fighting, and there'll be a civil unrest. So there'll be civil wars all over the globe, and I think that's quite, obvious at the moment as well, because the tensions over here are quite heightened. So
yeah. It's like, you know, divide and conquer, isn't it, Nick?
Absolutely. You know, I mean, first and foremost, the news is to feed fear. When do you ever hear anything positive coming from the news? So it feeds fear into the people. I dare I say it also, you've got people like Britain First. They don't help. They put loads of posts on Facebook. Facebook is probably the world's worst enemy because it's all a bunch of lies, photoshops, etc., come into play. So people are manipulated that way, but believing that actually that all Muslims are painted with the same brush. That causes irrational effects then. So it's just a downhill spiral, and it's only going to come to one conclusion if we're really not careful.
Well, I'd like to get Simon back. Thank you for that, Nick. I want to bring Simon back because I'm a firm believer in universal laws, and we do live in a duality. So no matter how bleak things look, there's something equal and opposite to it. And in that vein, Lynn in our chat room is saying, what can people do on an individual and in a collective way to better the world? So how do we find our way through this cosmic soup here? Simon, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a really easy question to answer. But all I would say is that all you can do as a human being is to be positive, go in with your heart and your eyes wide open, trust no one, apart from me, of course, and walk in the light. Because what I would say, and I was having this conversation, I'm going to do a massive bit of name dropping now, right? I was having this conversation the other night with a movie producer called David Putnam. You ever heard of him?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
10 Oscar-winning films, dead famous, lovely man.
I'm trying to hold it together over here, Simon. I am being very professional. Yes, I know who he is. Oh my God, that's so exciting. Okay, carry on.
Right. Well, I was having a chat. I'm working on a project with him at the moment, and we were having a chat the other night about the impact of the individual. And my view, and this is what I wanted to say, is what I said to him, is that I think that every single person's volition, positive attitude, belief in the Creator, belief in themselves, belief in the light, rather than losing hope and falling into the darkness, counts.
Mm-hmm.
He's not so sure. But I'm absolutely convinced, and you've seen this happen.
Yes.
With, I mean, for goodness sake, 20 million people in Britain went shopping on Boxing Day. Was it yesterday? Day before yesterday. Yeah. 20 million people went out and went shopping. Now, I mean, I think that's hysterical and totally pointless, and I would rather stick pins in my eyes than go out shopping on Boxing Day. But they went out. 20 million people went out. They spent £3.7 billion in one day, which I think was something like £51 million a minute. And they did that. Ridiculous, mad, and pointless, buying a whole lot of stuff they don't need, which they're going to then throw away or never use again or never wear. But they did it. And during the last British general election, there was an enormous focusing on the subject. We had a relatively poor turnout. I think it was like 66%. It could have been a lot more. There was, for a lot of people, a disappointing result. But there was an enormous focus that night of people's minds. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. And I think that when millions of individuals or thousands of individuals think about the same thing and want the same thing, it's the collective law of attraction. And I've seen this happen on a personal level with visualization and thinking about something that I would like to have happen, and recent experiences with wishing that people would come to me more to help them with the problems they have with their houses, which makes them really unhappy and interrupts their lives in a profound way. I thought I would like more of that to happen. I just would like more of that to come to me, because that, I think, is my calling. And it did, in quite a spectacular way, and in such a spectacular way that it actually took my breath away. And so I would say to the lady in the chat room, what you can do about it is to believe in yourself, believe in the force of the Creator, and believe in the light's ability to exclude darkness, because that's the way that it works. If you think about it, light is... You can't extinguish light with darkness. You can't, if you have a room full of light, you can't fill it with darkness. Darkness is an absence of light. And that's the way that good and evil, and the way that this battle works. This is probably the most important thing I'm going to say tonight, is that you can't remove the light with darkness. The light will always win if you just wish for it, if you just manifest it, if you just light a candle. It will always win. As soon as you light a candle, the darkness goes. It's a primeval thing, and it gives us great comfort when we switch on a light or light a fire or create light. It makes us feel good, And there's a reason for that, because that is the way the universe works. That's the way the creator works. It's the way the energy works. So I do think that we can, just by our own energy and by wanting something, we can make things light, beautiful, and we can make the world a great place to be. And the darkness and the desperation and the lie, Satan's lie about we're all doomed and we're going to lose, is a lie. I mean, there is going to be, I can feel it in my bones, there is going to be, next year is going to be apocalyptic. But we will survive, we will come out of it, and we will look at it as being a necessary breaking a few eggs to make an omelette. I mean, it's a kind of a bit of a trite cliche, but it is going to be that. To get to where we want to be, get to where we need to be in terms of goodness and the light, we need to go through some, what my wonderful mentor, Angela Watkins, used to describe brilliantly as mini crucifixions. And my God, have we not all been through those in our lives?
Yes, absolutely.
It hurts at the time. It feels desperate at the time. You feel like you're being crucified, but you come through it. And that's the lesson that I have learnt in my life, is that when things are really dark, you know, the darkest hour is just the one before dawn. You do come through if you believe. And it's a test. It's a conflict of energies, and there is a constant tension between the two, and you're seeing it manifesting at the moment. But we will come through.
I do agree with you. Before I go to Ted, I know that Nick's camera is on. He would like a moment to comment, and then Ted, I think we'll go to you and can just sort of segue into one of the topics that Simon did bring up. Nick?
Yeah, I agree with what Simon's saying, but I think there's one small element that maybe we've all seemed to have forgotten, is that, you know, Mother Nature, Mother Earth, Gaia, has also her own say in this, and I think what she's going to do is that she's going to shrug herself a little bit, and we're all going to feel the quake of that. I know it's been going on since obviously 2003, I think it was, to tsunami, but that's just increasing. Look at the floods that are going on. You know, there's devastation going on across the globe, which is natural, if you want to say it's called natural, but I think is actually Mother Earth's way of saying, do you know what, I'm not putting up with any more of your rubbish. Get off, you know, and that's basically, I think that's what's going to happen. There's going to be more of it, and I think that's why we all need to try and stick together to help each other. That's what I was wanting to say. Well,
that's a good point, and yeah, thanks for that, Nick. I mean, I was sort of thinking along those lines, but yeah, I totally agree. Ted?
Yeah, actually, that's quite interesting, because there's a segue from Nick to me there in that sense, because I'm very much of the opinion that Mother Earth, Gaia, as he calls it, or the Great Turtle, as John David, our friend, would call it, will heal herself. And we run around worrying about global warming and all of this and climate change and tsunamis and whatever's going on, and how can we adjust and we're not, I don't think we're going to ever have the commitment to achieve getting the sort of the climate under control and our emissions going on. And the fact is that in many millennia, maybe, we will be wiped off the face of the earth by the cataclysmic things that are actually happening down here, not necessarily all caused by us. And as Nick said, or somebody said about shrugging off, that actually we will be shrugged off the planet. There will be the survivors, the insects, another form of species and life and whatever, and we'll be just a twinkle in Mother Earth's eye from back, you know, from centuries ago. That's my kind of take on it. If Simon's there and can hear me, I was going to segue into one subject area, slightly sort of steering away from the geopolitics and Mother Earth, that as we've got like 10 minutes, which is crazy, isn't it, of time now that we cover the globe, the universe, and everything with our friend here. What I would be interested to share with the folks out there is something that I was a party to and found exceptionally interesting and fascinating, and there aren't really words to describe it, was something that you've alluded to quite a bit is about the exorcism and the fact that it's sort of taken off, and there is a requirement and a need certainly in the country, and you're being called on more and more. I just wonder whether you'd like to share a few of the experiences of the one that I was very delighted honoured to come with you, to run through an example of what you did down at a particular pub, and I'm sure Michelle wouldn't mind if you named it even. What we did and what we found and what you performed shamanically and spiritually for there, and the results of that.
Yes, of course, I'd be delighted, and you might like to throw your tuppence worth in as well, because you were there and you saw the whole thing happen, and that's probably one of the most violent and active and complex experiences I've ever had. We went to, at the invitation of the lady who runs a currently defunct pub called the Seven Stars in Robertsbridge in Kent, which I kind of noticed about a year ago and emailed them and said, can I come down and have a look, because I sort of feel like you need my help. And the email went to a defunct website, so I never got a response. So I thought, well, you know, please tell us. But then Michelle got in touch about a month ago and said, would I like to go down? And this place is a very complex portal. The pub has been there in one form or another since, I believe, the 12th century. Very, very old place, about the same vintage as the George and Pilgrim's pub in Glastonbury, which I've spent quite a lot of time investigating, and had one of my first major orb experiences in taking pictures in my room on 3 or 4 occasions in there, which looks like a snowstorm. And you came down with me to kind of hold my handbag, and we had an initial investigation around the building, which is it's quite a big place. I mean, if you imagine a great big, rather dark, ancient hotel, which has a lot of black timbers and lots of black beams and lots of old brick. We found ourselves drawn to the corner of the main bar, where we both, you being you and me, Ted, found what we thought was a pretty major vertical portal, which was where all these things have been coming through for, I suspect, many centuries. I think that there was a really unpleasant witch who lived there at some point, I suspect in the Middle Ages, who was a classic kind of black witch, a hag, a caster of spells, sort of person who would cast a spell on someone and make them ill to the point where they'll die, which I've seen happen today. I mean, it does happen. People do it, and it's a real thing. And I was very aware of the presence of this woman, plus a multitude of other transdimensional beings, everything from spirits who are reluctant to move on, people who have been associated with the building or have died there, or who have been murdered there over the last several centuries, dating back to the 12th century. And it was like walking through a film on fast forward, or that fast forward and rewind in 3 dimensions. And I have a process for connecting with the dominant souls, finding where the portal is, and going into it and stepping into it shamanically, which is the basis of shamanism. You know, the basis of shamanism is nothing more complicated or highfalutin than having a foot in the here and now and having a foot in the spirit world, and being able to switch between the two, which I do seem to have the ability to do at will. I am an enormously protected soul, And the reason I'm saying that is that I do not recommend that people experiment with this themselves with no training or clue about what they're doing. I've had a lot of people who've come to me who have played around with Ouija boards when they were younger or not so young, and Ouija boards work. When you invite energies to manifest and you give them permission, it's a bit like giving people your password. They will, and it works. And I don't recommend it, and I don't recommend playing around with it, because then you'll end up having to invite someone like me down to sort it out for you. When I'm clearing the space, I switch into, and this is something that I think I've been training to do this for many lifetimes, because it's something that I found extremely easy to do in this lifetime. I mean, I've worked with some fantastic mentors and trainers like Angela Watkins, who's nothing to do with this kind of thing, but is a fantastic sensitive, who trained me initially to switch my own ego off and allow spirits to work. And I've worked with Terry O'Sullivan, who is extremely experienced and effective spiritual worker and soul rescuer. And I've worked with some rather more exotic chaps from places like Bhutan, like Mohan Rai, who is world famous, who helped German couple write an incredible book about Tibetan Tantra called Tantra in the Himalayas, I think. It's an incredible, great big volume, and Mohan was their Bhutanese shamanic advisor, and also a chap from Burkina Faso, lovely man called Malodome Some, who anybody who's into this kind of thing will know his name immediately. Astonishing guy, astonishing tales, and a fantastic teacher. So it's a long road to getting the hang of how to clear these spaces and close the portal, close energy down, release the souls who are unwilling to. Usually they're unwilling or they're trapped. The ones who've been around for several centuries are just unwilling and like to hang around and cause trouble, because they're those kind of people. They're just sort of troublemakers. And it's a question of moving them on across the Stellar Gateway, not allowing them to come back, and it's complex and very, very multidimensional. It's not just, as I said earlier, Mrs. McGinty's ghost sort of shoveling one person off. It's multi-layered and complex, and needs to be done with a certain amount of firmness to close the door, and a deep trance where I allow my spirits and other spirit guides and the angels to work without me being in the way. So my ego disappears, which is what Ted witnessed, I think.
Yeah, and at that point, you know what we're going to do, folks, because we're coming towards the end of the show within about 60 seconds. Let's leave it there on the edge of your seats, hopefully, because, as I say, sadly, we're coming to the end of the show, and we do like to sort of podcast it with a certain bandwidth, etc. So, yeah, we need to have a show where we concentrate on this aspect, which, of course, is absolutely fascinating to everybody, fascinating to me. I was present and involved. I've done a series of mini exorcisms myself on people at the Namaste group, so I have an experience of it, and I would equally repeat what Simon said about Ouija boards and getting involved in something that you aren't fully braced for or prepared for. Don't do it. You know, that's the best thing to do. So yeah, right on the edge of the seat moment, which actually kind of works really well, I think, there, that we will absolutely arrange to have Simon back and go into more detail, because as you can tell, the man is a fund of knowledge, fund of wisdom, fund of experience, and puts it across in such a good, down-to-earth and understandable way that it's been, as always, excellent. Thank you so much for coming on. Would that it could go on for another hour and a half as always. It's been great. So I will segue back to Era with my love to Simon and my sincere thanks.
Yes, and I too, Simon, I thank you. What a fantastic hour and a half we've shared with you. You are, like Ted says, just a fund of information and wisdom, and wow, we do have to have you back. I want to hear more about these exorcisms and such. That is a topic that people aren't really tackling these days, and so I think it would be beneficial to a lot of people to really understand what's going on out there. And Nick, over to you for final thoughts.
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be on here with Simon at last. It's been too long, and to be honest, I didn't realise an hour and a half had gone already. So wow! But thank you to everybody for joining us, and let's get Simon back ASAP, hey?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I so agree. And, I just want to extend my condolences to Nina Ashby once more from all of us here at VVFM. I know that people in the chat room are leaving their condolences as well, and that is really heartwarming, and I know that she will appreciate it. Simon, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if I can just say one more thing, it is all about what each individual can do. We can make a difference if we intend, and there's that word that we started off with at the top of the show, Ted. Intent is everything. Know who you are. Know how powerful you can be, and know your potential, and know that you're pure love. When you know that, and walk in that, and shine that, then we can all make an impact to the greater good on this planet. Thank you so much, Simon. Can't wait to have you back, sir.
Great. Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good. And we will see everyone next week. Next week, I think, Ted, it's just you and I, and if Nick cares to join or is able to join, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I will be under the spotlight. I will be interrogated. AKA.
I've got to add something to this, actually, folks. Yes, it's the kind of rare opportunity to get behind the scenes with Era, and she's been hosting and presenting and doing all the work going on that's involved in getting Virtual Vision on the air for some years now. And it's a rare event that we get beyond the veil in the sense of who is Era Parisian herself, as an awesome host and an awesome international medium, a familiar face and a familiar voice on the show, but it will be very exciting to probe the thoughts and the history and the life journey of this lady, and it will be kind of nostalgic for myself and Era to be doing it, because we've been doing the show for quite some while, and we showcase guests. That's our prime directive or goal. So to get in there and to get to know the Era Parisian, and trust me, I will, is going to be so exciting and an awesome first show for the new year. So come along, invite your friends in, and let's have a really interesting opening show next year. I'm well excited. Back to you, Era.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it yet, but we'll see.
We'll find out.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and please check out Simon is writing for Your Newswire. I think that's what it's called, yournewswire.com. And if you want to do some reading on his articles, it would bode well for you. Thanks again. Thanks to Simon. Thanks, guys. You and Nick, absolutely wonderful to host the show with you. We'll see you all next week.